Lord Carnarvon did not die from a simple mosquito bite. At the exact moment his heart stopped in a Cairo hotel room in 1923, every light in the city flickered and died simultaneously, plunging the capital into a sudden suffocating darkness. Thousands of miles away, at his estate in England, his favorite dog reportedly let out a mournful howl and dropped dead. This was not a scene from a Gothic novel, but the beginning of a sequence of events that left the world questioning if something ancient and hungry had been released from the Valley of the Kings. The tomb of Tutankhamun had been sealed for over 3,000 years, protected by more than just stone and sand. It was guarded by a promise of retribution that science has spent the last century trying to debunk, yet the shadows in those corridors remain stubbornly long. The warning was said to be inscribed above the entrance to the inner chamber, a chilling sentence that spoke of death coming on swift wings to anyone who disturbed the peace of the king. While Howard Carter, the lead archaeologist, brushed aside these omens as superstitions designed to ward off ancient tomb robbers, the environment he entered was thick with more than just dust. There was an atmosphere of heavy, stagnant time, a physical pressure that seemed to weigh on the lungs of everyone who stepped past the threshold. Shortly after the seal was broken, Carter's own pet canary, which he had brought for luck, was swallowed by a cobra, the symbol of the pharaoh's protector. It was a sign the local workers took as a final warning, one that the Western explorers chose to ignore in their hunger for gold and history. To understand the weight of this interference, one must understand the boy who occupied the golden mask. Tutankhamun was not a mighty conqueror, but a fragile youth born into a house of vipers. He was the son of Akhenaten, the heretic king who had attempted to erase the old gods of Egypt. Tutankhamun inherited a kingdom in religious and political turmoil, surrounded by ambitious advisors like Ai and the general Horemheb. His throne was a precarious seat, and his health was no more stable than his reign. Suffering from a clubfoot, malaria, and a weakened skeletal structure, he was a king who walked with a cane while the weight of an empire rested on his shoulders. He was a child forced to navigate a palace where every smile hid a blade, and every ritual was a test of his right to rule. The internal politics of the palace were a labyrinth of shadow. The young king's marriage to his half-sister, Ankhesenamun, was a desperate alliance in a court that sought to control them both. When Tutankhamun died suddenly at the age of 19, the official story was a tragic accident, a fall from a chariot, a broken leg that turned gangrenous. Yet the evidence found millennia later told a more chaotic story. His tomb was small, cramped, and clearly prepared in a hurry. The walls were still damp when they were painted, leading to the growth of dark mold spots that still mar the murals today. It was as if those who buried him were not honoring a king, but disposing of a problem, sealing him away as quickly as possible to make room for the next regime. The timeline of what followed the discovery of this hurried grave is a statistical anomaly that continues to baffle researchers who look for patterns in the chaos. Within a few years of the tomb's opening, over 20 people associated with the excavation had met untimely or unusual ends. George J. Gould, a financier who visited the tomb, died of a sudden fever shortly after. Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey was shot by his wife in a high-profile tragedy. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the radiologist who X-rayed the mummy, vanished from the living world just as he was beginning his analysis. These were not elderly men reaching the natural end of their lives, but healthy individuals struck down by sudden illnesses, accidents, and psychological collapses that defied easy categorization. Some suggest the pharaohs were masters of biological preservation, intentionally sealing their tombs with toxic molds and dormant pathogens. When the tomb was opened, a rush of fresh air might have disturbed spores of Aspergillus flavus, a fungus that can lie dormant for millennia, For an explorer with a weakened immune system, inhaling these microscopic invaders could lead to a slow, suffocating death that looked very much like a divine punishment. This theory offers a rational bridge between the supernatural and the physical, suggesting that the wrath was not a ghost, but a microscopic trap set by ancient chemists to protect their sovereigns for eternity. However, this biological explanation fails to account for the mechanical failures and the strange coincidences that followed the artifacts themselves. Objects taken from the tombs seem to carry a heavy residue of misfortune. There are accounts of museum curators experiencing sudden bouts of dread and unexplained tremors when handling specific funerary masks. In the late 20th century, several individuals involved in transporting the treasures of Tutankhamun for international exhibitions suffered heart attacks or accidents shortly after the artifacts were moved. It is as if the objects were never meant to be viewed by the eyes of the living, functioning as anchors for an energy that resists displacement. The mystery deepens when we look at the tomb of Casimir IV in Poland, which provides a modern parallel. When that tomb was opened in 1973, many researchers died within days from a mysterious infection, leading science to acknowledge that ancient chambers are biological time capsules. But in Egypt, the scale is different. The Egyptians didn't just bury their dead, they engineered their transition to the afterlife with a precision that borders on the obsessive. Every hieroglyph, every ointment, and every ward was placed with the intent of maintaining a permanent, undisturbed state. To break that state is to interrupt a process we do not fully understand. The concept of the Ka, or the vital essence of the soul, was central to their belief. They believed that as long as the body remained intact and the name was remembered, the Ka could continue to exist. The traps, the curses, and the hidden chambers were not just about protecting gold. They were about protecting the infrastructure of immortality. If an explorer enters a tomb and disturbs the physical body, they are, in the eyes of the ancients, committing an act of spiritual assassination. The curse may be a manifestation of the soul's defensive reflex, a lingering psychic imprint that reacts to the intrusion of the uninitiated. In 2021, when Egypt moved 22 mummies to a new museum in the Pharaoh's Golden Parade, a series of unfortunate events struck the nation simultaneously. A massive ship blocked the Suez Canal, a fatal train crash occurred, and a building collapsed in Cairo. While officials dismissed these as coincidences, the sheer timing reignited a global conversation about the hidden costs of disturbing the dead. Do these ancient rulers still exert a subtle influence over the land they once governed? The architecture of the pyramids and tombs suggests a knowledge of physics and resonance that we are only beginning to rediscover. Some theorists propose that the granite sarcophagi and the narrow shafts were designed to focus electromagnetic energy or acoustic frequencies. If a human body enters a space designed for high vibrational resonance, the biological impact could be profound. Could the curse be a form of radiation or sonic distress caused by the tomb's buried geometry? It would explain why some feel a sense of overwhelming peace, while others are seized by a paralyzing terror the moment they enter the king's chamber. Archaeologists today take far more precautions than Howard Carter did. They wear masks, use robotic sensors, and treat the air inside a sealed chamber as a potential biohazard. Yet even with modern technology, the sense of being watched persists. There are stories from modern excavators who speak of hearing footsteps in empty tunnels or seeing shadows that move against the light of their torches. These are professionals, men and women of science, who find themselves whispering when they are near the sarcophagi, as if afraid to wake someone who is only pretending to sleep. The wrath of the pharaohs may not be a targeted strike by a vengeful spirit, but rather a collision between two different understandings of reality. We see the tombs as museums. The ancients saw them as engines for the soul. When we step into those spaces, we are stepping into a machine that is still running, powered by a logic we have forgotten. The deaths, the accidents, and the streaks of bad luck might simply be the friction caused by our interference with a process that was never meant to be observed. Consider the thief's curse, a common inscription in private tombs that threatened that any intruder would be judged by the great God. This wasn't just a threat of physical death, but of a permanent erasure from the records of existence. For the Egyptians, there was no greater horror than the second death, the destruction of the soul. Perhaps the curse is not meant to kill the body, but to mark the intruder, creating a ripple of misfortune that follows them back into the world of the living. It is a haunting thought that the price of our curiosity might be a debt that is collected over a lifetime. Even the most skeptical researchers admit that the statistics surrounding the opening of certain tombs are statistically significant. When you combine the biological risks of ancient spores, the psychological impact of claustrophobic, high-stakes environments, and the possibility of unknown environmental factors, the curse becomes a complex tapestry of cause and effect. It is a reminder that the past is not truly gone, it is merely waiting under the sand. As we continue to peel back the layers of the Egyptian desert, we find more than just gold and bones. We find a culture that was deeply attuned to the mysteries of life and death, a culture that took the protection of its secrets very seriously. Whether through sophisticated biological traps, architectural resonance, or a spiritual power we cannot yet measure, the pharaohs have succeeded in keeping the world in a state of awe and apprehension. The tomb is not just a grave, it is a boundary. And as Lord Carnarvon found out on that dark night in Cairo, some boundaries are never meant to be crossed. The legend of the curse endures because it speaks to a fundamental human fear that our actions have consequences that span across time. We want to believe that we can master the past, that we can categorize and display it behind glass without any risk to ourselves. But the history of Egyptology suggests otherwise. It suggests that there are forces, whether biological, psychological, or something more profound, that remain active in those silent halls. The pharaohs do not need to rise from their graves to exert their will. They do so through the enduring power of the mysteries they left behind. Tutankhamun was buried in haste, hidden in a small tomb, and nearly erased from history by his successors. Ironically, that is exactly what saved his treasures from the common thieves of antiquity. By the time Howard Carter arrived, the boy king had been forgotten for thousands of years. But his second life began the moment the seal was broken. He became the most famous king in history, but that fame came with a toll. The lights of Cairo, the death of a distant dog, and the long list of victims are the footnotes to a story that began in the golden hour of the Nile. Some researchers will always point to the mold, the bacteria, and the simple bad luck of stressed men. Others will look at the timing and the strange mechanical failures and see a pattern that science cannot yet map. In the end, the truth of the curse lies in the gray area between science and the unexplained. It is a multi-dimensional enigma that defies a single answer. We may find the spores, we may map the electromagnetic fields, and we may explain away the coincidences, but the feeling of being an intruder in a sacred space never truly leaves. The Valley of the Kings remains a place of profound silence, a silence that seems to hold its breath every time a new stone is turned. The wrath of the pharaohs is not a story of the past. It is a lingering question for the future, a reminder that some secrets are buried for a reason, and some kings are better left to their eternal sleep. The story of the boy king is a reminder that the treasures we bring into the light carry with them the weight of the darkness they inhabited. We treat the past as a collection of objects, but to the people who built these tombs, they were life support systems for the spirit. When we disrupt them, we are not just looking at history. We are touching a live wire of human belief and ancient engineering. The shadows in the Valley of the Kings are long, and they do not seem to be receding. Whether it is a microscopic spore or an ancient promise, the swift wings of the curse continue to hover over those who seek to uncover the secrets of the sands. Some doors are meant to stay closed, and some kings never truly die. They simply wait for the next person brave or foolish enough to turn the key.